Language is mankind's unique gift. When language serves mankind,
in speech, in written word and gesture, when we can call things by their name, and plants and animals
lack the knowledge of these things,
this commands respect.
Ik ben Irma Hoofling. Wie bent u?
Ik ben Norbert Tolen. Ik woon in Den Bosch. Waar woont u?
These people were introducing themselves and they told us where they live. They also asked your name and where you live. It may well be that you didn't understand them. That's because they were speaking Dutch, the language spoken in the country where you are going to live. Dutch is a very difficult language for foreigners, so it's important to learn it as quickly as possible. Imagine arriving in Holland and being unable to speak or understand one word of Dutch.
The man who does the checking came in and said, "Netjes." I looked at him because I didn't understand any Dutch yet. So I asked, "Netjes? Why did that man say netjes?" The other Somalians with me, they didn't understand it either. And I said, "I don't know what it means." But later I found out that the word netjes means neat. The funny thing is, in my language, the word netjes means dirty.
Imagine you've got a stomachache. You need to go to the doctors. How are you going to explain where the pain is and what sort of pain it is? The word for stomachache is quite easy, but it may be cramps or some other sort of pain. There can be so many different causes. You need to explain exactly what's wrong with you. When you're at home, in your own little castle, in the house that is your kingdom, you can speak whatever language you like. But as soon as you step outside the door, you have to take into account that you need to communicate with other people. Because otherwise, there's a real danger when you come to Holland. You'll prefer to live with people from your own community. But that doesn't help you to integrate, does it? You won't learn the language as quickly because you won't need it so much. Because you only speak Turkish, because the people around you also speak Turkish. It's a danger, and at the same time, it's very human not to do your best to learn the language. You don't learn the language only by taking classes. You learn it by talking to other people, so you need to be active with other people. You need to make contact. When I started my Dutch course, my husband and I decided to speak only Dutch. It was at a very low level, of course, not adequate for our communication, but it did help. And then, sometimes, my husband tried to speak to me in English, but I know I didn't understand him.
I'll never forget the first conversation. It was a private conversation I had with a Dutch woman. I was sitting on the bed and she was lying down. I was sitting there and actually speaking Dutch. She was completely amazed. I consciously said to myself, I'm speaking another language now. I talked for half an hour without stopping. This was after 2 or 3 years of taking Dutch classes. I was so proud. For that entire half hour, I continued to speak Dutch and I kept going, trying to formulate my ideas in a foreign language. She was knocked out. Wow, she said, you just talked Dutch for a half an hour.
You have to realize that you really have to want to speak the language if you're going to succeed in a new country. That's how I see it. In Holland, you're not going to be successful if you don't learn the language.
Ik ben Nanekuya Efriye. Wie bent u?
En ik ben Kwasi Yaboa. Ik kom uit Ghana, geboren in Accra. Ik woon in Amsterdam. Waar woont u?
It's a good idea to start learning some Dutch in your own country. You don't have to know a great deal. Once you're here, you'll find out that there are all sorts of ways of learning the language quickly. Visiting people, watching television, doing the shopping, or doing voluntary work, like Hamid. Hamid is doing voluntary work on a project with school children, keeping the neighborhood clean, and he meets lots of people this way. But what is he learning from it himself?
I'm learning the Dutch language.
The Dutch language.
Yes, and social skills. And you meet a lot of people. That's important.
Yes? So you get to know lots of people.
Yes.
I did some voluntary work too, at a community center close to where I live. And I thought, I'd like to meet some other women and spend more time with them, not just a cup of coffee, but do something with them. Voluntary work seems to be a typically Dutch thing, because I noticed that in Morocco, for instance, it's totally unheard of.
Voluntary work can be very important for everyone. It's a way of making an active contribution to society.
You don't do it for the financial reward, but for the feeling it gives you, that you yourself can make a difference. You feel good about yourself. And as soon as you feel good about yourself and you show it, you communicate it to other people. And you see that people who do that, who do voluntary work for organizations or institutions or whatever, that they develop a feel for the language much quicker than people who just go to language classes 2 or 3 times a week.
It's also a way of meeting Dutch people and of learning their customs. And it's also a good way of building up an initial network.
The people who have the most contact with Dutch people are the ones who learn the Dutch language the fastest and the best. It's the same with anything you learn. You learn it by doing it.
In Nederland heb je veel
In Holland, there are a lot of organizations which give Dutch language courses, like this one. You need to find out which organization suits you the best, which one you can afford. It's not at all unusual in the Netherlands for adults to go to college or take a course. Many adults continue to study to broaden their education, or because their job changes, or to find a better job. Sometimes their employer will pay for the course. Sometimes they pay themselves. Sometimes it's a day course, sometimes an evening or weekend course. Women taking care of families at home who want to get back to work often follow a course too.
Dag meneer.
Dag.
Wat moet ik doen vandaag?
Ook voor migranten en
There are opportunities to further your education for migrants and newcomers too. There are educational facilities in Holland which specialize in providing courses and professional training to newcomers.
Ja, moet ik koffie maken?
Ja, ik ga vertellen ook aan de koffie maken.
Ik heb nog een paar situaties op papier staan.
Er zijn verschillende manieren van leren.
There are various ways you can learn. There are also forms of education in which you can combine learning with work.
Ja, dat gaan we nu ook doen. We gaan het alleen niet warm maken. We gaan lekker op de werkbank werken.
If you finished secondary school in your own country, it's also possible to further your education in Holland.
Als je wilt worden toegelaten
If you want to get a place at a college or university, you'll need to have your education certificates assessed in the Netherlands, because they will not always be considered of equal value here. Language is a great gift to mankind when language serves mankind in speech, in written word and gesture, when we call things by their name. And plants and animals lack the knowledge of these things.
Met taal drukt de mens uit wat hem zo
Language enables people to express what makes them human, what beauty, dreams and fear do to them. Saeed, this is an excerpt from what you've written. As a writer, what else does language mean to you?
Taal kan ook heel erg afsluiten.
Language can cut you off too. I came to Holland when I was 6. And even though I learned the language quickly at that age, I can still remember that for that short period of a year or a year and a half, I had to make a huge effort to really understand this other reality, this other language. You too, if you really want to be able to understand Dutch, will have to make a real effort with the language, or you'll shut yourself off from other people.
What you're really saying, language is everything. So if you don't speak the language...
Well, things have no meaning for you. Imagine. You're happy. You always want to share happiness with other people. And if you don't know the language well enough to share your happiness, there you are, closed off in your own little world with your happiness. And only you can experience it and you can't share it. So it's almost as if it doesn't exist. That shows how important language is. Because if you speak the language, you can share your happiness.
You don't learn a language by just studying it or writing it. You learn a language by speaking it. To learn the Dutch language, you need to be in contact with Dutch people. And if you do have contact with Dutch people, you automatically come into contact with the Dutch customs. A good example of the Dutch culture is the tradition of keeping the curtains open. This is to let everyone know that you have nothing to hide. But the idea is not for everyone to shamelessly look in. People usually make appointments before visiting one another. You also don't normally go to a birthday party unless you're invited. Birthdays are very important to the Dutch, as are birthday presents. Oh yes, don't just congratulate the person whose birthday it is, congratulate everyone. Don't be surprised if you see a man standing at the cooker with an apron on, because in many families the men and women fulfill the same roles. Dutch people are often very direct. Household pets are part of the family too.
Kom eens. Kom eens. Foto's. Ja, van de vakantie. Vakantiefoto's.
Vakantie, leuk.
People don't make a fuss about nudity. Dutch people like to discuss things in such a way that everyone eventually gets his or her way.
Strakke buik. Ja, mag ik een compliment geven? Het is gewoon een mooie vrouw. En ik sta daarnaast met een gebakje en dat pak jij dan af.
Schat, ik vind jou.
So that in the end, everyone goes home contented. It's also a Dutch tradition to be as noisy as possible and to take as long as possible about saying goodbye.
Doei!
Ik ben Irma Hoveling. Wie bent u?
Ik ben Anouk Jeffrey.
Hoe gaat het met u?
Goed, dank u.
Language can embrace what people would rather give no name to.
Taal weet wat
Language knows what we reveal and what we hide away.
Taal spreekt.
Language speaks.
And holds its peace.
Taal leeft.
Language
en
lives.
sterft.
And dies.
Sterft de taal?
When language dies,
Dan sterft de mens.
Mankind dies too.